Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and today we're going to do another deep dive into the fascinating world of starship manufacturing. And so whether you're an investor or someone who designs ships, or you just really like starships in general, there's going to be something here for everyone. This is the story of Sienar Fleet Systems, the designer and manufacturer of the iconic TIE fighter line. Now, most people are familiar with the massive corporation that Sienar Fleet Systems would one day become, working alongside the Empire, but what a lot of people forget is that in the late Republic period, Raith Sienar Technologies, as it was known during that period of time, was a middle-sized starship manufacturing company which had been struggling in the last few centuries and was very much on a downwards trajectory. During the Old Republic era, they had been quite a formidable shipbuilding firm. They were responsible for the dreaded Interdictor-class cruiser more than 4,000 years earlier. In the years leading up to the Clone Wars, Raith Sienar Technologies was struggling. They were mostly known for producing mundane landing craft and shuttles, stuff that just didn't excite shareholders at the quarterly financial reports. More importantly, these were very low-margin platforms that didn't do much to build the brand. If you wanted excitement at the time in the starship manufacturing industry, head over to Slane Corporal and their vertically integrated fuselages, or the newcomer in town Income Corporation. Formerly known for repulsor lifts, they had now created a true classic in their first outing with the Z-95 Headhunter. Raith Sienar Technologies suffered from two things. One, it was truly an ancient corporation, as old as Quat Systems engineering almost. And so there was just a general lack of innovation and conservatism in the culture that prevented them from keeping up with their competitors. And two, instead of being professionally managed, this was a company that was not only owned by a family, it was also run by a family. Corporate nepotism at its worst. Being born into a rich family doesn't necessarily prepare you for running an intergalactic corporation like this one. And so centuries of missed opportunities, lack of innovation, just backwards thinking because of corporate nepotism meant that Raith Sienar Technologies only existed because of the massive power and wealth it had acquired during the Old Republic period. And now those last bits of resources and capital were bleeding out onto the dirt-creek floors of their factories. There is really no future for this company at all. Now, in all fairness, the last 1,000 years or so have been rough for the entire starship manufacturing industry. Limitations and sometimes outright bans on the construction of new capital ships and the demilitarization of the republics severely hurt companies like Raith Sienar Technologies, and so when the Separatist crisis reached a boiling point and erupted into a massive war, while the rest of the galaxy was running around in fear and confusion, Raith Sienar saw the lifeline that they desperately needed to basically pull themselves out of this hole and survive. But they ended up kind of messing up the entire situation, as we'll explain later on in this video. What's even stranger is despite their mishaps during the Clone Wars, just a few years later, the company would rebrand itself as Sienar Fleet Systems, and it would win the Imperial Navy's lucrative multi-purpose starfighter contract, and suddenly it'd become one of the largest shipbuilders not only in the galaxy, but probably in galactic history. It's clear in retrospect that Sienar Fleet Systems benefited more than any other firm from the rise of the Empire. But I guess the question I have for you guys today, and hopefully you'll have an answer for this by the end of the video, is what did the Empire get from Sienar Fleet Systems? A reliable line of fighters, an engineering marvel, or perhaps just one of the grossest examples of Imperial cronyism and corruption? Generally speaking, scions of extraordinarily wealthy families like the Sienars are pretty unremarkable. But that's just the stereotype, because every now and then a child is born with the right personality, with the right intelligence and motivations, that they can take full advantage of what their station in life can afford them. Born in 60 BBY to Raith Sienar, Chief Executive Officer of the engineering firm known as Raith Sienar Technologies, he would attend Rigovian Technical University, one of the finest engineering schools in the Old Republic. It was here that he developed an interest over failed engineering experiments after an assassin droid developed by one of his classmates murdered her. He wasn't necessarily affected by the death of one of his classmates. Instead, he was fascinated by the failures of her design. He would gather the droid and start a private collection of technological failures, a reminder perhaps of the danger of one's own hubris and that the exhilarance of discovery should always be tempered by due diligence and the proper safety measures. This is a pretty profound thing for a young man to do. Raith Sienar was a very eccentric individual, but he also understood his own strengths at a very young age, and he also learned how to temper those strengths, which is, I think, a very rare kind of quality for a young person to have. In a lot of ways, this foreshadowed the brilliant but also meticulous engineer that he would one day become. When Raith Sienar graduated from university, instead of following in the footsteps of his father, he journeyed out into the world and sought to make a living on his own. He would start a scouting firm that mapped out and explored new hyperspace lanes, a job that was usually done by Jedi explorers and other types of wild men who loved exploration. The unknown region was perhaps one of the more dangerous areas that a young surveyor like him could travel to, and it was here that Raith Sienar would become independently wealthy.
It's not a liquid!
From selling survey information he had collected over the years. But once he returned to the family, instead of taking a cushy management job, Raith decided to once again go out on his own terms, using fake identities this time to work at competing starship manufacturing firms, including Corellian Engineering Corporation, Bactoid Armor Workshop, Income Corporation, and the Trade Federation. He also had an extended stay with the Sienar. This was an insectoid race that actually worshipped manufacturing custom starships. The Sienar would go on to found Harchal Engineering. In those few years, Raith Sienar basically picked up insider knowledge and industry secrets from all of the major starship manufacturers in the galaxy, something that would take a normal individual probably decades to do. Some might call it industrial espionage. But once again, Raith Sienar wasn't really just interested in profits or destroying the competition. One could say that, like the Sienar, he had a fanatic love for building ships. And this is really who Raith Sienar was. He wasn't after the limelight, he wasn't after his father's position in the company. The only thing he was really interested in was just designing innovative and technologically advanced starships. And so his father recognized this in his son, and he would establish an internal workshop known as Sienar Design Systems within the company. And Raith Sienar would further create the secretive Advanced Projects Laboratory, which would be responsible for making some of the most cutting-edge designs in the entire starship manufacturing industry. In a lot of ways, Raith's operation sounds a lot like Lockheed Martin's Advanced Developmental Projects, aka Skunkworks. Chief Palpatine was not an industrialist. He wasn't a builder of things. He had very limited governing experience when he stepped into office and would oftentimes delegate these duties to others. Instead, he started his professional life in the Galactic Senate, and he rose to power not through legislating or championing certain ideologies. He was a deal broker, an organizer of such. Think Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell. Now, Chief Palpatine didn't desire the limelight initially. Instead, he worked patiently behind the scenes, collecting allies, creating partners, and basically building an unstoppable team for when he finally does try to take over the chancellorship position. What is it that Chimera said about his own master, Darth Plagueis?
What kind of deal did you make with him?
I didn't. We didn't exactly. I just owe him. You know how he is. He collects people.
As a young man, Sheev was quite antisocial and problematic, but his master taught him to control his more psychotic urges and use his charm and charisma to build a network of people, collect them. Palpatine would become quite skilled at identifying talented individuals with the skill sets that he needed. Individuals like the orphan Gallius Rax, whose undying loyalty would serve Palpatine well even after his death, or the exiled Chiss Commander Thrawn, whose strategic mind was second to none. He would be sent to the hottest trouble spots in the Empire during the Galactic Civil War. And then there was the young captain of the Outland Region Security Force, Wilhelm Tarkin, whose ambition and cruelty almost made him Sith-like. He would keep the rest in line. There was also the Jedi prodigy Anakin Skywalker, who would one day serve as a powerful enforcer and apprentice. And then there was Raith Sienar, who also managed to catch the eye of Emperor Palpatine. Raith Sienar in 39 BBY would meet a young Wilhelm Tarkin, who at the time was serving in the Republic Outland Region Security Forces still. The two would keep touch over the years, valuing each other's skills in their respective fields, and it was thanks to Tarkin that Sienar would land many important contracts with the Republic Navy. A few years later, disaster struck for Raith Sienar. You remember the Sienar, those cultists who worshipped precision shipbuilding manufacturing. Well, they found out that Raith Sienar was not actually a true believer, and so they sent assassins after him. Raith would escape the assassination attempt, but his father would perish. The board of Raith Sienar would quickly appoint Raith Sienar as CEO in succession to his father. He was just in his early 20s at the time. By 32 BBY, most likely thanks to Tarkin, once again Darth Sidious would approach Sienar to build the Scimitar. That's the vessel that Darth Maul would use for many of his covert missions. The ship itself was based on designs of Darth Tenebris, the master of Darth Plagueis. Tenebris's public face, Rugus Gnome, was actually a well-known ship designer. The Scimitar courier vessel would feature a stygium crystal cloaking field which made it completely invisible to the naked eye. An extraordinary achievement that would rival Raith Sienar's two other major accomplishments, the twin-ion engine and also the interdiction machine. But when Maul was defeated on Naboo by Obi-Wan Kenobi, not only did he leave his torso behind, he also left his proprietary ship in one piece on that palace landing platform on Naboo. The ship would immediately be seized by Republic authorities, and investigators would later connect components in the ship to Sienar Sith technologies, and Raith Sienar was brought into the Senate for questioning. And although he would deny any connections to this mysterious ship, Raith Sienar would still have to close down the design wing of his company, and he would have to lay low for quite some time. It also should be noted that several of the designers and engineers who worked on the Scimitar mysteriously ended up dead. We don't know if this is something Darth Sidious did, or this is just a darker side of Raith Sienar's personality. Sienar would eventually re-emerge from the crisis by rebranding his company Republic Sienar Systems, and he would supply the Republic Navy with shuttles and transports. But RSS's most famous project was a prototype corvette with the same stealth technology used on the Scimitar. This corvette would be used during the Battle of Christophsis by Anakin Skywalker to bypass a Confederate blockade. Unfortunately, the construction and R&D cost of this project was simply too massive, and Republic Navy procurement balked at the enormous maintenance cost as well, and so only one unit was built. This was a massive blow to the company. Raith Sienar was perhaps a bit too ambitious with this design. The stealth corvette was far too ahead of its time, and he was unable to recoup any initial investment that the company placed into this platform. It was then discovered sometime in the middle of the war that Republic Sienar Systems, like many industrial manufacturing firms of this time, was selling components and actual starships to both sides of the conflict, and so they would be sanctioned by the Republic Senate. By the end of the Clone Wars, Republic Sienar Systems was completely bankrupt and owned by the intergalactic banking clan. And after the crisis on Scipio, the IGBC was nationalized, and Republic Sienar Systems, along with all of its assets, were also nationalized. You know, Palpatine had a dream. You could say that he was a big starship fiend. He liked to imagine a Star Destroyer hanging peacefully over every world controlled, a stormtrooper battalion in every settlement, and an Imperial governor in charge of every system. Like his political aspirations, Palpatine's economic policies were also driven by his massive insecurities and his desire to control every little detail within his empire, to everyone's detriment. But Palpatine had inherited the Republic's extremely weak financial situation that he created himself, and even with control of the IGBC, the largest banking system in the galaxy, and the establishment of his own Federal Reserve through the Imperial Central Bank, there was only so much that monetary policies could do to help the central government raise capital. With much of the galaxy in ruins, there was plenty of growth opportunity, plenty of people who needed jobs, plenty of cities to be rebuilt, but there just was no capital to do it with. Now, the printing of credits was definitely one solution, but print too many credits and you get hyperinflation, and that causes new problems on its own. And so as a result, Emperor Palpatine also focused on using the existing clone army to generate wealth. And the only way you use the military to generate wealth is by seizing things, and that's exactly what he did. Palpatine would strong-arm member planets and corporations either politically or with actual force to give up its resources and assets for the Empire. Thus began the complete nationalization of most major industrial, manufacturing, mining, and logistic companies in the galaxy. The industrial giants that backed the Separatist Alliance were nationalized. Even mid-sized manufacturing firms that were pretty dynamic and probably should have continued being privatized, like Incom Corporation, were nationalized. There were whispers also of Imperial correctional facilities being turned into labor camps. There were even accusations that the Empire was using slavery from worlds that resisted political transformation of the Republic. and thus began the very rapid and unnatural militarization of the Galactic Empire. Usually this type of ramping up of production at a national level was due to massive spending projects by the government, which usually ended up creating more jobs and boosting the manufacturing and industrial capacity galaxy-wide. But in this case, lacking capital, Palpatine just seized corporations, consolidated them, and then seized resources and manpower, and used essentially cheap and almost free resources and manpower. It's a very Sith-like thing to do, and in the long term, it's just not great for anyone involved. The general rule is free market economies will always outperform centrally controlled economies like the one that Palpatine controlled. But the Imperial economy was truly just focused on one thing, the development of a massive defense industry. Palpatine didn't care if everything else in the galaxy rotted and fell apart. And it's for this reason the Empire probably never could have lasted beyond 20 years anyway. The Galactic Civil War would have happened no matter what, because Palpatine's economic policies were so idiotic, destroyed the livelihoods and well-beings of so many average citizens in the galaxy that revolution was really the only course of action that they could take. Radicals, criminal elements, people living on the peripherals of society will always have problems with the institutions and governments that organize society. Alone, they really can't do much, but when the middle class, when the average person who's usually not very political, finds their life completely uprooted because of the policies and decisions of the central government, that is when an authoritarian state begins losing complete control of everything. Palpatine's military-industrial complex took everything from the people, resources, wealth, even the manpower necessary to prop up other industries as basic as, food services. But at least for a small moment in time, as messed up as it might seem, there was a miracle happening within the starship manufacturing industry. And this was all centered around the newly created Sienar Fleet Systems, which Raith Sienar was placed in charge of. You see, after the Scimitar Maul controversy, Raith Sienar kept his head down and continued to work on various engineering projects, including refining the Scimitar's prototype twin-ion engine design. In many ways, this engine would become Raith Sienar's magnus opus. Taking what he had learned from all his years working for various starship manufacturers, along with the Shi'Char's dedication to precision, the twin-ion engine was one of the most efficient engines ever designed. It had an extremely low heat profile, it could be charged in flight by solar panels, and most importantly, this engine contained no moving parts and therefore needed almost zero maintenance, which was a huge deal. Because for Palpatine's dream of one Star Destroyer for every planet, for every system to work, he also needed roughly 3 to 4 squadrons of TIE fighters on each one of these Star Destroyers, and as the Republic found out during the Clone Wars, starship maintenance was extremely expensive and probably is what ultimately sank the Venator-class Star Destroyer carrier program. While smaller and less expensive than the massive Imperial-class battleships, the Venator's reliance on hundreds of small fighters for offensive-defensive purposes ultimately made this ship far too expensive for a peacetime Empire to operate. The TIE Fighter would completely change the game for the Empire, and at the core of the Empire's new low-cost, multi-purpose fighter platform was Raith Sienar's revolutionary design, the twin-ion engine, the TIE and TIE Fighter. This, combined with the Empire's complete control over the supply chain, manpower, and resources needed to build the ship, along with massive scaling up of starship manufacturing, meant that a single TIE Fighter, get this, cost only 60,000 credits. That was about a third of the price of the T-65B X-Wing, which is simply ridiculous. The TIE Fighter also featured some other interesting cost-saving measures. For instance, there were no deflector shields on this fighter. Instead, a tough spherical armored cockpit was built. This shows us the truth about the Empire. They had a lot of manpower. They trained some of the best pilots in the galaxy, and they were more than willing to throw them away. But when it came to resources and wealth, well, the Empire was quite poor, especially during this period. And thus, the TIE Fighter's kind of disposable design. The ship also featured a very powerful pair of LS-1 laser cannons, but unfortunately they didn't have any ordnance launchers for proton torpedoes or concussion missile launchers, but I guess that's what a Star Destroyer's, 50 or 60 turbo lasers are for? In many ways, the TIE Fighter was completely different from all other starships on the market at the time. It had severe limitations that most ships did not, but for the purposes it was built for, short-range interception, very few ships could match the cost, quality, and performance of these ships. Which really makes sense, this design coming from Raith Sienar, a man who always walked his own path in his life and, thought outside the box. There's no doubt that the TIE Fighter was an impressive feat, but as the Galactic Civil War kicked into full swing, its glaring weaknesses were exposed to the Rebel Alliance. While individual TIE Fighter pilots could keep up and oftentimes outmaneuver their Rebel foes, it was the lack of things like hyperdrives and shields that led to the Empire desperately looking to upgrade this platform to meet the new demands of the battlefield. One could argue that the TIE Fighter's short-range interceptor design was better suited for peacetime patrolling, rather than the actual battlefields of the Galactic Civil War. But even then, its limited range would decrease the Empire's influence in the galaxy and ability to patrol many systems. The entire situation could have been avoided had Emperor Palpatine selected an actual naval officer with experience to lead starfighter doctrine and procurement of said platforms. But Palpatine's top-down approach created a platform that, like him, was potent, but also extreme in design, exposing great strengths, but also exposing great weaknesses for his enemies to exploit. Raith Sienar was a brilliant starship designer, but he was really focused on innovation and technologies. Did he actually understand the threats that the Galactic Empire would face in its future? Did Emperor Palpatine? I guess this is what you get when you have a hierarchical power structure like the Empire, where one man's personalities and tendencies are reflected and then increased by many magnitudes through the flawed but also brilliant people they put in charge of various programs. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about Sienar Fleet Systems. Was this ultimately a good choice for the Empire for their multi-purpose fighter program? As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.